Will everybody join me?
think
I
we have
pledge allegiance
Pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag
of
of
the
the
United
United
States
States of America,
America,
and to the republic
republic for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under
under
God,
God,
indivisible,
indivisible,
liberty,
with
with
liberty and justice for
for
all.
all.
Thank you. And Justin, thank you for being here with us.
Great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have roll call?
Yes, Commissioner Bernstein,
here,
Commissioner Fuderer,
Present.
Commissioner Robin,
Present.
Commissioner Soto,
Naomi, you have to,
Yeah, hi.
Commissioner Marshall,
Here,
Vice Chair Craig,
here.
and Chair Gazan will be out.
And just a quick note, I was on the phone a little while ago with the city clerk, and I asked him about the 2 seats that are still open on the commission. And he said because they're dark for the month of August, they're not voting until September. And that there are 7 applicants that they are going to meet with for the 2 positions. So that's just a quick update, if that should come up.
Thank you.
I think there's 3 positions, right?
There's 2. Mark Marshall filled the 3rd position when he came on board.
right.
There are 7 of us, 7 with Mark, sorry. Okay. Acceptance of the agenda. Any questions, any changes, any discussion on the agenda itself?
I move we accept the agenda.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
I,
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Seeing none, we stand. Next is public comments. We don't see, yes,
The minutes, I have a correction to the minutes, Sid.
please.
Okay. It's on 2B and it is the word survey. We have not developed a survey. We have only developed application. And so those words survey, in editing, the survey should be application, and it's also once the survey the word should be the application. Our subcommittee worked on the application. No one's developed a survey at this point. We've spoken about the survey, but there is not a survey done.
Thank you. Chantel, do you have that? Thank you. Any other additions or corrections? We stand. Public comment. We have nobody on that's coming
Are we
in.
going to do a motion for the minutes?
Pardon me?
Are you going to do a motion for the minutes?
I move to accept the minutes with Commissioner Federer's changes.
I second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? We stand. Thank you for that. That's why I'm just the vice chair and not the chair. So, okay. Okay. I do not have any welcome or comments from the Measure J chair since I'm not the Measure J chair, but I welcome everybody. And Heather, I didn't meet you yet, so it's nice to see you.
Nice to meet you too, as well.
Thank you. Number 2, under new business, Measure J budget update. And now, without me sounding like I'm totally inept, is there a reason why new business is before old business?
We always do
No.
the budget first.
That might be a standard format. I think Chantel was going off prior agenda meeting minutes. Were you from the
Yeah,
past?
it's been like that the whole time.
Okay, that's what I thought, but from other boards, I was just curious if that's That's our standard
I
operating.
was just following past agendas.
Okay,
It may be correct or it may not, but we'll find out, Sid.
okay. I'm gonna do old business first anyhow, if that's all right. with everyone.
Yeah, do you mind if I, out of respect to the city manager, do you mind if let him have a few comments before? And then he could go off to his next meeting?
I
That's
think
a
that's
good
fine.
idea.
I think that sounds good to me. Thank you,
Thank you.
Justin, and thank you, Nancy.
Hi, thank you and good evening. I really don't have a lot to say. I know that I've worked with the staff team to clarify some of what we discussed last time I was here and you all met, which was kind of the process for both refining some of your current plans for projects, including some of those community projects, potentially surveying departments. And I think we've gotten some clarification, at least internally, on how that should work and what it should look like. And then rolling some of that into a process with city council, either a strategic visioning process, which we certainly want to do, or just making sure we close the loop on at least this year's CIP fund with Measure J. And then ultimately the 5-year CIP as well. So I'm here if there are any questions on that. Otherwise, I know that Nancy and Joelle and I all spoke and can provide some of that clarification later on in the agenda.
Are you, Justin, are you leaving now?
I've got some other work to do in the background, but I can actually stick around.
Okay, because there's a question, discussion on the social media and communications that.
Yeah, I'll be here, so I can, if there are questions at that time on that topic, I'm available.
Thank you.
You bet.
Are there any questions at this time that anybody wanted to ask the city manager? Okay,
One question on the strategic visioning of city council. Are there like set dates and any already established like goals for that strategic vision? Can you like share some insight as to how that is being imagined right now?
Yeah, sure. We're targeting end of October or early November for dates. We haven't really zeroed in on the exact date yet. And a staff team is conducting a series of meetings, and we'll probably have a check-in with council, sometime in September to really solidify things. But right now, what we envision is a 2-day session, one day that's spent primarily on what we aim to accomplish in the next short term. So that's probably 1 year. And of course, some priorities just extend beyond a year, right? So if we're talking housing or economic development or even major projects relevant to Measure J, it might be 1 year focus, but a time horizon that goes at least 2 or 3. The second day is going to focus on how we do our business. So we're going to be asking commissions to identify anything in the process that just hasn't been especially smooth. So for instance, the way the budget process went this year, where we didn't really have a time to sit down and focus on capital projects. It was presented as part of a regular meeting. Council gave some feedback that they weren't sure that everything reflected strategic priorities. I think probably the Measure J Commission felt a little like, there was some hard work there that maybe it got dismissed. And most of that was circumstantial, that we just didn't set up the right time. So we want to identify those kinds of things so that we can improve those processes, whatever that is. If that's going back to having a dinner with commissions or a joint session once a year, those would be the things we would discuss on that second day. And then we're also putting some framing to some of the work we'd like commissions to do in that strategic planning. So for instance, we would probably want every commission to go back and review the enabling ordinance and just kind of check, are we doing everything within that ordinance? Are we doing some things that are beyond? Does any of that language need to be tweaked? And again, ask a lot about priorities that will look pretty different for a commission like Measure J compared to, say, a sustainability commission, where the strategic priorities could range programs and projects and those kinds of things. But we'll have some standard questions so that every commission is providing some similar input to council. And we're still developing that instrument, but would expect to deliver that to you after the August break.
So,
And we have a couple of other things in the works, a resident survey, a way to engage some of our staff members to further solicit priorities. And there will probably be a couple other open public engagement type exercises to complement the survey that we're administering, so that council has all of that information by the time they convene in late October or early November.
So in terms of our Measure J, in terms of the projects, which, everything was taken off and the communication stuff. So we have to wait. We were supposed to meet with them in September. Are we going to not get full direction until after the October, November meeting?
I think some of that is up for discussion. So what I discussed with Joelle and Nancy is if there are some projects that were kind of really ready, and in fact, already there are some projects moving forward where there is some Measure J involved, and we're just writing the staff report and saying we'd like to pull the money from the kind of, the contingency account, if you will. They just put it in an unallocated account for now and apply it to the project. So we can always do that on a project by project basis. Reconciling the entire 5-year CIP, I do think will probably happen after the strategic session, but this interim period is a good opportunity for Measure J to clarify, here's why we selected certain projects maybe over others. There might be a philosophy behind that. Like, we want to focus on this kind of infrastructure, or we perceive certain initiatives like a library have languished for too long, to communicate the why. And similarly for council, to kind of pan out and look at the big picture of where we've been and where we are, check with our general plan, check with our high level strategic plans, whether it be an airport long range plan or a sustainability commission long range plan. And that's bound to spark some other thinking about things that we might not be focused on, but we will remember and want to put back on the table. So this is a good time to get all that together so that, again, when council meets, they really have the full complement of inputs, everybody's broad perspective. And ideally, we don't miss anything. And when we come out with priorities, those priorities are going to be stable because, it was a thorough exercise.
Thank you.
I have a question, Justin. This might not be a fair question to answer right now, but for purposes of today's agenda, staff and engineering have put together a long and deep list of projects for consideration for next budget year. We're giving, at least today, a lot of attention to that. Do you expect that there will be subsequent guidance that could make our efforts right now a little spinning of wheels?
There's always some potential in that, but I think that's sort of built into democracy and the iterative process. We wouldn't want, if the reverse is also true, right? Which is if council said, Measure J, this is what we want you to do. And then you said, well, have you thought of this other thing? They may say, oh, geez, no, we didn't. Good point. We actually want to revise our thinking, right? So this isn't quite linear, even though the organizational chart is linear and council sits on top and makes the decisions. What we really want is more like a cycle where Measure J says, this is how we see the world. Council says, thanks for the input. Let us take that input and consider it with all the other things that we know and have to grapple with and share back with you kind of what the direction is based on that. You start to implement that direction, but then share other thoughts that you have along the way as you implement it. That changes their thinking. And it's kind of constantly going back and forth. So I don't think you should wait. I think you should do some of that work to clarify your own thoughts of what priorities ought to be. But yes, by the time that makes it to council, they're probably going to touch it and add their thinking, and it will probably come back a little different.
Well, let me ask the question. My question better. Let me ask it. Let me be better at it. Do you have a sense that there are projects and priorities that haven't made it to the dashboard of engineering?
I think that's not likely because I think usually even absent a really concrete strategic focus, we're talking about the things we're talking about for good reasons, right? But usually what's missing there is something really more concrete in terms of what is first, what is second. The 5-year CIP really forced that exercise a little bit, but even then, I don't know that it's been fully reconciled with the capacity of our engineering team or, all of the fine details. So I think probably everything we're doing already reflects those priorities. It's just not refined. I'll give you a really good example. When we sat down to do one of our first staff sessions on putting together this program for council, I asked the question, what's gone well and what hasn't gone well in the past? We pulled out a 2016 program And the goal for that year was to build the downtown park. You know, that was 2016. Well, it's happening, but it's 2021. So, and that's a common theme, right? We're constantly taking on more than we can really do. So if nothing else, we have to decide what's most important and what's slightly less so that we know what gets delayed or deferred. But even better, if we could create a plan that's actually executable within whatever period we're talking, 12 months, 24, 36, doesn't matter. That would be even better. And if you look back in the history, that really just hasn't happened. We've constantly said we're going to do more than we've been able to do. So something there needs to be tweaked to get it a little more organized, because what happens is somebody was expecting that something to be done. And then when it doesn't get done, it leaves people kind of frustrated. You know, we talked about creating an equity and social justice committee a year ago. We've just formed the committee. And it's not because nobody cared, it's because we had all this other work to do. So that's where we want to get better.
Thank you.
Any
So,
other?
may I follow up on that? So are you asking us maybe just for Measure J input that we kind of come up with our set of priorities to give them something to begin to work with?
That's exactly right. You are first an input to this program so that you can say, council, here's the world as we see it from the perspective of Measure J and this funding source. And again, I've seen the 5-year CIP and I know there's rationale behind it, but I don't know the rationale. I don't know if projects were picked because the project by itself was good or because there was a theme or a principle behind it. Like, let's focus on our existing facilities before we build new ones, or let's focus on, you name it, parks and recreation more than, you know, something else. And so that would be good for council to not only have the list, but what was the thinking? You know, why was one thing put in year 1 and another in year 3? Why was something left off the list entirely, if that makes sense? And so they have the benefit of not just the what, but why. Why did you think these things might be important? Because that's what's really going to influence what they're thinking, and which is the point in part. And I know each commission is different, and this kind of commission had an oversight role, which is kind of different than an advisory role. But bottom line, let's all share our thinking with council so they have the benefit of that insight. And then let's ask them to do the job that they're hired to do or elected to do, which is to reconcile all of that and figure out where we're going and to give us the direction where we're going. And then we, in the next part of the process, are helping them figure out how to get there, right? So if they say, for 2 years, we'd like to focus on X, and for the next 3 after that, focus on Y, then you have clearer direction and can go back and refine some of those lists.
Right.
So I what is unclear to me, and maybe Joel or Don, you have some feedback here. What are some clear ways are we doing things differently and talking about projects differently in the next 3 months, 2 to 3 months, that is going to get the council that information that Justin is describing here? Because I'm just speaking for myself, but I feel like we've been doing that, and maybe it hasn't been documented in some way that is more helpful, but it is unclear to me how we're supposed to repeat the conversations that we're having, that we have had, so that it's executable for the council come October, November.
You're exactly right. So every commission is different. So this is a little bit boilerplate, and it will resonate with some more than others, both because of the different roles and functions, and because some are already very strategic and some are a little more ad hoc, right? So if you've done a lot of that and the list it's been reconciled and the principles behind it and the reasons why is well established, it's probably as simple as writing it down so that council gets the benefit of that insight at a very kind of condensed level, right? Because you've put that together over months, and we're going to try to convey it to a city council in minutes or an hour or half an hour, so that we can do the same thing with sustainability and arts and, you know, big areas like housing or homeless. It's a fairly high level exercise, but you've also done some of that, I don't want to say in a vacuum, but without perfect clarity from council, right? So if council's been thinking, my top priority is to build fire stations, and you guys were thinking we really need to get to a library, I'm making this up, and I realize you've done a little bit of both. then there's a coming together that needs to happen. Why library, why fire station, and a reconciliation so that we have clarity, so that we have a plan that everybody's touched. It's been reconciled. Ultimately, council's made the final decision, and then we have direction. I'd like to see that process happen kind of every year, back and forth between the commissions and staff and council, as well as residents, so that we're kind of constantly checking in on where we've been, where we are, where we're going. And it's a little less all over the place, which is my perception is it's a little all over the place. And certain other commissions come up with strategic priorities that don't get touched for months. And sometimes it's only because there's no time on the schedule, but the commission's left thinking, well, why do we do this work if you're not prepared to do something with it? So I want to fix that.
Can I speak a moment? You spoke about having a liaison with council, and I think that would be a real important move. So when the question comes up, our liaison can address it to them. And I'm going to talk in my report on the projects, because I've given it a lot of thought. And when you can get council to come up with their 8 really important things they want and can accomplish, I think Major J can follow along on that same line, because before they had hotspots, and Mr. Marshall can address it, there was a theme to the projects they did. So I'm going to speak about that later, not right now, but I really support that idea. And there should be a liaison so that we don't have miscommunication with city council.
And I think that, so that's a great example of process, and don't want to go too far down that road. But I will say, one of the things that's hardest for council is they have 10 hours a month to do all the business. They get 50 to 100 emails a day. They're asked to meet with citizens left and right. And some of them work full time and are starting families and doing other things. They have created a behemoth of structure to input a bottleneck, which is the council process. So maybe they can delegate, maybe they can do things, but for them to be more engaged and more present, I'll just be honest, I don't know how they can do it. And I would argue they can't, or they certainly can't do it well. So somewhere in there is staff fulfilling a role, because we're paid to be here full time all the time. But we've been deferring to council sometimes, which is our job. But council can say to staff, I'm delegating that liaison role to you. I want you to communicate back and forth a little better. We can create a system of reporting that's different from what we have now. There are lots of ways to get at it, and that's the goal. So please feel free to make those suggestions, whatever they may be. And then we'll have to deal with something or create something that's consistent between the commissions, ideally, to make all that work better than it is. It's very iterative. We won't get all the way there in 1 year. But we can improve.
If I could just add one thing, I know I don't want to belabor, but I've seen a lot of the other commissions and they sort of have a very particular focus, and it's a little bit easier to define process and goal. I think with Measure J, the ordinance is very broad as to what is community or downtown development. And I mean, that can be community is basically everything from, the street paving to fixing a sidewalk to helping something in the police department. So
salaries.
It's going to take a lot of, as we've seen, there's a lot of variety of projects that are very in depth. And I mean, we talk about them after engineering has done, dozens of hours of research. And I think they're either going to have to give very broad direction that we can move from if they can't be more involved, but understand that there's a lot of detail within that they're not going to be able to follow exactly from half an hour direction or an hour direction in the beginning. It's not like public art or something like that, which is a little bit more streamlined as to how the process and focus is. So that, and this is also a lot of money that, and eventually it's going to come back up for a vote. And, so there's going to be a 10-year process before this comes up for vote again.
Yeah, Jeffrey, I think what the city manager was saying is that during this strategic planning, we're going to get a lot more information out of them to see what exactly they want. Then we could take that information. We have so many buckets of projects already, and use that strategic to guide us on which of the 5 projects should we, whatever they tell us the theme will be, that could pull out of our list of 20 projects or so.
And the goal is, if you've given them the input and then they've said from a very high level, this is what you'd like to focus on, when the CIP comes to them, it's not a new thing. It doesn't need as much conversation, and we don't see what we saw this year where they say, boy, I'm not ready to just buy into that. I don't know where it came from. Don't know exactly where it came from, because it came from the input you provided them, the reconciliation and the prioritization they did and gave back to you, and then you're bringing them something they were already expecting to see. So you're totally right. This will look different at all the commission levels for sure. But we hope to accomplish some similar efficiency across the board. And maybe efficiency is not even the right word. Clarity. Where are we going, right? How important is one project versus another within Measure J? How important is homelessness compared to sustainability initiatives or economic development? You know, I'm trying to do this very broadly and not ignore even some commissions where it is a lot more focused already, to give them also the opportunity to weigh in. But you may have much less work to do there than we have to do reconciling those big operations and management areas.
Thank you. Don, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to really quickly address Commissioner Soto's question to Joel and I. The one thing you did get differently in the last few months was the 5-year CIP sheets. You're definitely now getting projects in a more, you're getting more information in a more organized fashion that the commission has ever gotten. You've seen it for about 2 or 3 meetings, and so you're kind of pretty comfortable at it. When you consider how City Council got it, they got it as a small piece of this large budget, and they were reading hundreds of pages of documents. You guys actually have the advantage of like taking your time, digesting it. You know, you've seen it a few times, so you're very comfortable with it. As you know, as you see, we move forward. Maybe that's one strength that that has been done differently, to answer your question.
Yeah, I 1000% agree, Don. And I think you guys have done such good work in making us as commissioners stronger to be able to understand the projects and the need for them and the limits for and there's so much more documentation on it. And so I could not agree more. I'm just unclear as to, you guys updated this and shared it for today's packet. And what are we talking about then if we're still going to be waiting for direction when I guess that there's the dog park, right? But I'm just and I hate to belabor this, and I know we're talking a lot. I really don't understand what today's conversation looks like. We've talked about this before.
We'll make it more clear with some questions, but the real simple thing would be, help us understand why these projects were selected, right? And then when we give them to council, we're also asking them, what are your broad priorities? And they might be different. Some of them might be thinking districts, right? Is there equity between districts? Have you guys looked at it from that perspective or not? Maybe you have, but maybe you haven't, in which case you'd say, oh, good point. Let's evaluate this from the perspective of equity among districts. Or maybe there's a different kind of social equity angle to it, and they want to ask you to evaluate it that way. So you're going to share with them what your thinking is. They're going to share with you what their thinking is. And then out is going to come something more clear. And it might be the exact list that exists today. Most likely it'll look at least a little different because there'll be more people engaged in reviewing it and considering it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we're about an hour into it. So do we want to start moving on to the project so we can get through it?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Which one is the first?
You want to do old business 3A, right?
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Review and
Joelle, you-
discussion of project survey from the proceed.
Yep, Joelle, you're up.
Yes.
So 3A is a review and discussion of the project survey from form and processing of the completed procedures. And I think Don was the one that was spearheading that. And if that's really what you want to talk about is the survey and how we're going to get that out. I think that was the additional documentation that was sent out.
We changed it from survey to application.
Right, correct.
Okay.
Don, you're muted.
Commissioner Frederick, did you want to talk about what the subcommittee did on this application?
Okay, all right, why don't we move there because it kind of dovetails into where we're speaking. I apologize for the first sheet that you saw. First of all, our subcommittee has redone the application from the 2018. That's all we've done. We've taken the old work, added more things to it, changed language. Dawn's been wonderful in making it look very professional. The last thing that we needed to do is to figure out how we're going to score this thing. In talking to other people that have worked on this, it seems like every commissioner is to have a vote. And then you all get together and put your numbers together. And I have to say to you, I find that when I really sat down and thought about it, totally overwhelming for the commissioners and for the process. So what you got today, thank you for getting this out, is sort of how we saw how to score this. What I got from you last meeting is that you were comfortable with the subcommittee, whoever that would be, to do the first read and really get rid of stuff that should not move on. And it's clear, it's not complete, it's late, and it maybe would receive, in our opinion, 2 and below. And I think if you're a 2 and below, you're out of the ballpark. The subcommittee would agree on that. If I think it's 2 and they don't, blah, blah, blah. So we would have agreement there that these applications do not move forward. And then we put them together in groupings, as you see. A is going to be business and tourism on down the list that you have. And so the 3 people on that subcommittee would be responsible for reading the applications of the A, B, or C, D, whatever group they get. Okay, that's really great. And then we would say to commissioners, they're ready to be read. And in thinking about this, I really got overwhelmed, particularly with maybe Sid's problem with his computer and my dumb thing yesterday. Not all of us work on the same system. Just getting somebody to make sure that technology works, so we go from that digital platform over to this guy. And then sitting there and reading, if you have 100, to me that's overwhelming. You had 200 and some. That is, it's impossible to do that. I think this is really something we need to think about in the next month. And as the new city manager has said, if city council comes up with 8 priorities and we, as Major J, can take some of those priorities and really make those our priority too, like hotspots. That was your original commission's goal. Am I right, Dawn?
Yeah,
You worked on hotspots. You didn't work on planting trees. You didn't work on solving homelessness. You worked on hotspots. And so the applications came that way. So I think we need to finish our work that we're in now, allow the manager to do what he needs to do with council. Nothing is going to happen in September. I mean, I really feel right away, we don't have a survey out. We don't have a process out. Who's going to do what? Who's going to write that survey? You know, everybody has a job and everybody's busy. And I think we're all giving a lot of time. So I too don't want to belabor that. I think what we have now is a decent application and we have a decent scoring system. How that process is going to function is something I really think we all have to think about. How many applications do each of us want to read? And do we spend a special day with a tally sheet adding this all up? So I think we need to think about how we can make it more streamlined. And I appreciate the fact that individuals in the community, groups in the community can ask for something from this commission, because that's how it was voted upon. I think it could be biannual. It doesn't have to do every year. Somehow maybe we ought to go to a biannual just eliminating the money, giving out the money.
Right.
I think there's something we now, because everything's new. Everything's new in what we're doing in the city. So I think Major J has time to really think this through better and more economical for our time, more significant to the city, less really detailed work on staff's behalf.
Linda,
I
I just had a thought.
yeah,
I don't know if this is possible, but I just have a thought. I think the city is setting up surveys, but I don't think our staff is doing it. I wonder if we could consider paying somebody to do the survey and send it out and get the results and tally it up for us.
that's not my department. I mean, are you asking, Nancy, that Major J would cough up a little money to have that done professionally?
I don't know. It's just a suggestion, you know, because I know you might get 300 applications in, and like you said, with your different technology and stuff, and I have no idea how much that would even cost.
Yeah.
But it might be worth looking into something of that sort.
Yeah.
To have
Well, I think it's
Great.
again, yeah, the process of what we are going to select. I think what we have in the mill now, we need to at least talk about, and if we get different direction, we're going to get that. I don't think we should throw out that work, but I think whatever's going to come into us, it needs to be a different process. And I really, you know, ask everybody to think about that. And maybe that is the answer, Nancy, that we need to spend some of that money to be more professional.
You know,
Obviously, yeah, go ahead.
Why don't I look into that? I'll make a note and I'll look into that next week. And I'll talk to Amy and a couple other people, see what their process is for the surveys and what the estimated cost is.
Okay,
And then
but you know, Nancy, let's be really certain we don't step on council's toes, because you know, what do we want from the community? What are some needs the community wants in all the districts and all the places? I think that Naomi, can you speak to that? That was your suggestion.
I was just going to ask Naomi if she
Yeah.
had some comments.
It's actually Naomi with a short A, but just a quick heads
It's
up.
like butter, Naomi. You live with it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I just have a question and then a comment. All of these conversations about council priorities, I thought were for Measure J funds outside of the community initiated projects, or is it all Measure J funds? My impression was that community initiated projects would be $1 million up to the discretion of Measure J.
That is
So,
correct. That
I
is
think that this whole conversation about making sure Measure J is in line, and we're, you know, making a cyclical process of gathering feedback and receiving feedback was completely separate from the community initiated projects, right?
When we initiated that $1 million community,
Yeah, that's what we need to really focus on, are those projects. And I thought that's why we were setting out this application, is for you guys to figure out what we want to spend the $1 million on.
Yeah, that was
That's
my
like
intention too. And so with that, I think that's a project we can work on and can execute on and don't have to wait until November to get that council feedback. So I would really encourage us as a group, decide how we want to move forward and really try to meet that September deadline. I think it was like release it and then get applications by December. I'm like, the dates are fuzzy now,
Right.
but you know, I hope that it sounds like there's a lot of consensus for that.
The only problem with that is the things that we've made changes on, the council has to approve that. And
Well, Linda, I think if you get your list together for your $1 million, we'll bring that to the council with maybe another option or two if there's something on there they're not in love with. But usually every time you bring your community projects, I don't think they've really, since I've been here, haven't taken anything off.
Mhm.
We can work on a staff report. We can add the list of your items, a couple sentences of why you want those items or why the community wants them, and then we can bring that one faster than all the other projects.
If I can add a point, Nancy, probably directing this to you. So the feel-good experience of having Nancy suggest that we go to a third party to manage this sounded great. And maybe there's also a another key step that a third party can manage for us, which is to create a workflow so that we can then independently do our part as commissioners to evaluate and score the projects.
Mhm.
And I think that might make things it's probably pretty easy in the real world to do that digitally, and would make life probably much easier for us this time than it was for Mark and his co-commissioners several years ago.
Yeah, because you have people out there that.
We actually requested it and got denied.
This is what,
Yeah.
this is what these surveys, that's their full-time job. So for them, it's, you know, probably a heck of a lot easier in less amount of time than all of us doing it.
Yeah.
So let me
Yeah.
price that out and see if it's possible. And again, I would bring the application to the city manager for review before we send it out. And also, it's up to him if he wants to then take it to the city council for their approval. But other than that, I think we're pretty good to go green light and start moving forward and picking projects once we get our survey back or
Okay.
applications.
Naomi, do you? have
We're
a-
saying to possibly outsource the consolidation of the data so that when we, right, because it's not like changing the application, like that's already made. So we would just create the form, like on Google Form or SurveyMonkey, the results come back in, and then that's when it's outsourced.
Yeah, and they'll manipulate the data. I would like to get them involved at the beginning, unless there's something easier that they would recommend since they're the expert. But I think we create what we want. I'll find out, you know, get a couple companies, we'll give them a call, and then find out what do you do and what would be the cost. And I'm assuming they have a great database where they pull all this information. We give them direction. Anything that's not completed, or like you said, under a certain amount or doesn't make sense, they can put on a separate spreadsheet and we can review that even if at a later time.
Mhm.
So we know how many we got that were either A, incomplete, or B, didn't make any sense. In case you do get a call or email and they're like, well, why didn't you select my project?
That's good data.
Mhm.
Is the consensus then that everybody's comfortable with Nancy suggesting?
Yes.
I
I
am.
I love the idea, and I don't mean to be like capital S skeptical across all of today's session, but I just want to make sure we don't have the same potential glitch or delay of using a third party support for the application that we have, and I'm sure Jeffrey and Brian will add, but we're experiencing the same exact thing of like trying to be more efficient and using an expert in communications, and that work has been delayed. So I just want to make sure that like there really is buy-in from the city to be able to use external.
I'm on it.
support.
I'm on it. You got to know when I'm on it, I'm on it.
Okay.
I get it done.
I think for our purposes collectively, full speed ahead as fast as we can go on this. This is so
Absolutely.
important.
Yeah, I have a note here. I'll start on Monday, or if not even this weekend, I'll start trying to figure out, you know, sending some emails, seeing what we use for the city. I'll email a couple close cities next to us and see who they use or how they do their surveys. And we should have something to you by next week.
Mhm.
Well,
Right.
Wonderful.
so just as a point of thing, so we can't discuss anything now until September.
Well, can I
So-
email, Chantel, can I at least email them information? You
Yeah.
might not be able to discuss it, but you'll have it.
Yes,
Yeah,
And if we have to, we can always have what they call
a special-
meeting.
yeah, so we could have a special meeting. And the other thing is that the committee that is working on this could also meet and make a recommendation. But I think, I agree that the fact that if this could delay things further, I mean, I think we've been in a talk and wait pattern for a long time now. And I think the fact that we want to start seeing things executed and we want to see public input and awareness of Measure J, I'm just concerned that I understand with getting things organized and done properly. And I think this is a great idea. I just want to have in mind that this would have to be pre-approved to spend whatever money and done. And once the commission approves, happens very quickly.
So let's do this. I'll meet with Chantel and Don and Joelle next week and say, these are the three I came up with. Do we want to have a special meeting? And this is the cost. It has to be cost realistic.
Right.
So, and I move really fast, maybe too fast sometimes, Jeffrey. So my anticipation is having a special meeting and having them get that survey out in the next week or two.
I don't think we're worried about you working too fast.
That would be great.
Okay.
Is everybody in agreement with that?
Yes.
And
Yes.
I am,
And
yes.
so if we, I don't know if we have all the documents ready. The
have the
application, is the
application.
application ready?
Mhm.
So I
Yes,
would need,
we do.
I would need the application emailed to me and the final scoring sheet that we decided on.
I can see you, I'll walk those over.
Okay, and then at least I'll have those in case they ask me, the surveyor, what does it look like? So I can email it to them and they can take a view of it before quoting us.
Okay.
Now,
Can I
what if-
raise,
I have one
Can I raise-
question. Yeah, I have one question though. Usually these type of surveyors, they're more electronic. Do you guys still want to put these out at all the city locations? I know we're going to put it on our webpage.
I think so. I think the majority are going to be electronic. And if we do get any paper,
Yeah.
either find a courageous volunteer or I will find somebody to do the data entry. But
Well, we'd have to send them to the surveyor to do the input.
okay, then I think that we should include that in the budget. But I think for the most part, we like highly stress electronic submission.
I agree. I agree. Or do we put something, instead of actually putting the survey out, put something at the location saying, please go onto the website and fill out complete measure, do like a Measure J logo type of thing and have them put those at the locations with the link. And if they need to, if they don't have a computer, we could recommend them go to the library with the address.
I think we can have a few paper. I don't imagine there's like more than 15 paper copies we're gonna have. Like the whole world has been virtual for 2 years. So
Okay.
I hope that we can have more electronic submissions.
I have a quick point, not for discussion, but a request, I want to circle an item for the subcommittee to look at. I don't usually get this sensitive on points. It's a little subtle, and which is why I don't think it's a discussion point for right now. The category F6 is kind of a catch-all, and maybe it needs to be labeled differently so that when this has a perpetual place in records, it's a sensible category name.
What would you recommend?
Yeah, what's
changes
your
to?
recommendation?
I don't have one other than there doesn't seem to be much cohesion from technology to the band of Indians to LGBTQ. That's all.
I understand what you're saying.
So moving on. Thank you.
Yeah.
Justin, do you see that we're a good group?
Think about that. Okay.
It's like a slush fund.
Yeah, it is, but we could move technology up with business. And maybe we think of a broader category for kind of the other areas, but those were added to the application this time. They were not on the application before, thinking that those communities may ask for funding.
Mhm.
But we can see where we can fit those in, Robin. That's a very fair observation. I think you have to tell us you approve of the scoring sheet, and then we can move on from this discussion. And then I will get all that information to Nancy and
Well, I think we want to get feedback on the scoring from if we get the expert, no? Like if they want to review it and then I guess I'm gonna do we have to finalize a scoring sheet and then send it to bid or like send it to get some quotes? Or do we say this is our application, this is how we're thinking of scoring, how much would it cost? And then we
One-stop
come back.
shop. I imagine they have an awesome database where they just dump this information. The online, if they're portals, they should have a database and be able to sort this any which way we want.
Yeah. Everybody okay with that?
Great.
I think this is great.
Okay, then we're going to move on to 3B, update on social media announcements.
Well,
Jeffrey?
Jeffrey?
so unfortunately, I guess the city is not using the social media people that they had after we did the video with Sid. And I did speak with Amy, and I guess that's also in discussion at the retreat about communications and social media and trying to do a more coordinated effort through the city. I did sort of stress that there are projects that have been done and are completed and are in the works that it was important to get out. James and Jesse, the new floors there, and some of the other projects, and she was going to try to see what she could do in the interim. But unfortunately, the plan of having a more ongoing social media campaign, I think, has to wait till after the retreat. She did mention that at the end of September, beginning of October is potentially it's supposed to be the grand opening for the downtown park, and she wanted Measure J to play a major role in that. But it sounded like most of the other efforts in terms of the ongoing communication about what we approved and discussed and we're planning would all have to wait. Is that accurate?
Not quite. Can I clarify?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what happened is, and this is a kind of a classic example of one of the reasons why I say we're kind of spread out all over the place. So we have certain procurement rules, and basically when certain services are procured, they're okay until they reach a certain threshold. If we have a contract valued at more than $25,000, we have to bid that out competitively. And so what we had is a couple of contracts that started small, and then they were expanded and they were expanded and they were expanded. And sometimes they were expanded a little bit outside the original purpose. So for instance, if we had a relationship with a consultant and we were using them for Spanish language or something else, and then we thought, oh, we could do some Measure J videos too. You know, we basically exhausted or very close to exhausted our procurement authority for that contract because the money was being spent kind of by a few entities and people. So we couldn't continue with that service like right then. We had a little bit of money left and we needed to make sure we maintain some of our Spanish language because that's like the only way we get to communicate with some of our non-English speaking residents. But we are creating an RFP for those services at the same time we're kind of using the last funds on that last procurement. So that doesn't necessarily wait. We'll bring somebody on board, but I think that person is still a bridge service. We have to resolve what are our communications initiatives, what is our capacity. We put a bunch of money in the budget that would enable us to hire more staff or hire more consultants. But I'll be honest, this is all over the place again. You know, the Arts Commission has been kind of doing their own thing, creating their own website, doing their own press. Measure J has wanted to promote itself. That's all good. We've got a police department that had its own social media person to focus on their stuff. Meanwhile, we don't have a social media person. We were relying on kind of two contracts. We've got kind of two people that do communications, sort of, Amy and Denise, but they're not even really housed in the same department. So there is a component of this that is like, we can do a lot better than this with an organized program, but we don't want to just stop the good things that we're doing in the meantime. The only true stoppage was to close out a contract that had been spent and start a new one. But since we didn't see that coming in time, the RFP process does take, a few weeks to get somebody on board. And it very well might be one of the companies we've already been working with. I don't know that for sure because we have to let that process play out. So we will keep doing this. But the other thing I'd like to do with support of this group and a strategic planning session with council is figure out what are our strategic communications priorities and how can we make sure we're kind of taking at least a consistent approach across the spectrum of these priorities. We're kind of getting beat up on homelessness on social media. There's a bunch of stuff on crime on Nextdoor. I won't even go on it as a neighbor because some of it is just so the way it is. And so we have to decide where are we going to direct those resources. It can't really just be shotgun do everything because that's not an effective communication strategy. So we just have to be a little more selective and start to have a central component to all of these disparate pieces. In the meantime, we will have resources. So if there's something that's really, pressing, we can continue on some of those campaigns as we transition to something a little more focused and long-term, where I hope we'll develop some of this capacity in-house. Because we really, it's inefficient to do this all through consultants.
Okay, well, I mean, to fill you in on the discussion we as a commission had, what reason why we started this was that there is not enough communication to the public about Measure J funds and how they're used. There's not even very good communication anymore about what Measure J is. And I think, you know, between new residents and memory lapse and people who are not that involved in the beginning, I think you'd find probably a small percentage of population actually knows what it is or where the money comes from and what it goes to. And one of the issues is that, you know, we're hearing about the city's budget and it's doing better, and Measure J, a lot of these projects as it relate to parks and community centers and road paving and things like that are things that really matter to the public, and that we want to have the word out there as a positive thing. We understand the homeless issue and we understand the crime issue, but this is actually something that there is, I mean, may not ever happen as fast as people want, but there are things happening. And a lot of these directly affect the community. And specifically as it came to the downtown park, you know, there's differing opinions about whether that's a community park. And so the idea that one of the discussions that we had is there's a lot of stuff that engineering is doing in the parks. The new flooring at James O'Jesse matters significantly to that community. And that is something that that we wanted to get that message out, and we feel it's important. And then eventually, you know, long-term thinking is that this will come up for vote again and people want to know exactly what Measure J did with it. So
somebody in the past had made a beautiful brochure. Do you recall who that was?
we've had a brochure, we've had different kind of presentations at the neighborhood picnic, which was usually
It happened, yeah. So I think maybe we just update a new brochure on that also.
Well, so those are all good notes. And I totally agree. We need to make sure we're staying in front of people, especially with good news. One other thing to let you know, because some of this was about videos, we are bringing forward a request at the very next council meeting to fill what used to be a half-time position for video type production that was primarily used to record these meetings and others. But we're asking to make it a full-time position so that we can do more of the kind of side work like the videos that you guys were creating. So we're trying to hire that person right now and do more of that good stuff. We do want to be careful. I've done not done personally, but been through a couple really good social media audits. And those, as some of you know, if you're familiar with the world of search engine optimization and the way those algorithms work, they're really good at choking down your reach if you're posting too often, because what they really want is for us to buy ads. And I'm not hesitant to buy ads because in a community our size, that's not expensive. But there is an art form to staying relevant and in front of people and getting maximum reach. And if we ignore the science behind that, we end up hurting ourselves sometimes rather than helping. And so I just want to make sure that stuff is organized. I want to do more, not less, for sure. So let's get there. We already stumbled over ourselves by kind of advancing a contract before we were noticing we were at the end of it and not getting another one going. So this is kind of why we need to work together a little more tightly, line these things out, make sure they're strategic, curate that kind of program a little bit more across the board, and be selective with our tools. If social media is saturated or we're doing other things, it's brochures or a mailer or signs, and we should brand them so they look nice and professional and somewhat consistent within, at least within programs, if not throughout the city. And as some of you know from doing that kind of work, we don't do a phenomenal job of that. So we can do better.
So one thing along those lines, if maybe you could help with, I know that the Chamber of Commerce does a quarterly magazine that gets mailed out to all the residents, or at least 30,000, that I think a year ago or so, we were including information on Measure J and projects that were done. And if there was a way to keep that as a regular section of the magazine, doesn't have to be a huge thing of what projects there. That's sort of the easiest way to make sure it happens at least on a regular basis and gets out to the community.
I thought I saw that last month in there. Did we
Well,
just?
it
2
wasn't-
months ago. There was something 2 months ago.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
was all, that was in there.
Yeah.
You
I'm
need
just-
that-
This
Sorry,
is the direction from the previous city manager, and I think it would necessitate that reinforcement or direction from you just to make sure that happens.
the Major J website is from 2018. And
We're in the
I,
process of updating it.
yeah, the
Sean,
figures are wrong and put more
Yeah.
things in. Yeah, thank you.
Uh,
Nancy.
I don't have an admin assistant, and I'm so happy that Chantel's able to help me out during this past year.
Yeah,
And she's doing her full-time job plus helping me out with this commission. So we've been working on it, and she did bring some items over for me today. We wanted to meet with Joelle and Don to see if they have any updated pictures that we can also put on there.
yeah,
So
that's
we are
great.
working on it.
That's
Well,
great.
We'll
It's
pick up,
just, you know-
we'll pick up speed.
Yeah.
But the transition in my office, then the assistant city manager, police chief, coming out of the pandemic, we just rehired a bunch of people that were laid off. We still have a couple dozen frozen positions. I want to do it all yesterday too, but we will get there, I promise.
And they just placed an ad for the finance director's admin assistant. So if any of you want to apply, please feel free to do it.
Oh, yeah.
Can I
We've been
ask,
practicing.
Nancy and Justin, is that I had asked a few months ago about the fact that the planning commission is televised, but we're not. Is there any updates when we'll be on the air again?
Yes, once we hire the full-time video master, whatever you want to call him. Yes, we will have, once we hire the full-time position, if the city council approves it at the next meeting and we onboard that person, then we will go back to live recordings.
And there's some potential that will be an in-house position. And if it is, we might be able to do that as early as a month or two. If we have to hire from the outside, probably more like 3, but we're going to get that person on board with the goal of returning to videoed meetings.
Okay, thank you. That's important for us.
And just so you know, some of you probably know, in government, it takes a little bit, some things do take a little bit longer because the process is actually you have to write an RFP, which is usually like 15 pages. Then you have to send it out. Then you have to wait like 30 days for people to bid on it. Then you have to have interviews and have an interview panel. Then you have to make a selection. Then you have to have the contract drawn up. So it's a long process. Then you have to take that to council and get that approved. So that's why the process of that is a little bit longer than me getting you a surveyor.
Well, you have to understand, Nancy, since you spoke to us all tonight and told us when you're on top of things, you're on top of things. We're not worried.
Okay, thank you.
For sure.
All right. Anything else before we go to new business? Okay,
Folks, I'm going to sign off and say thank you and good night. I look forward to continuing the conversation
Okay.
next time. I've still got a few
Thank you
things
very
to do.
much, Justin. Thank
for
you.
joining us, Justin.
Thank you.
we really appreciate you being at our meetings. It means a lot.
Yes.
Thank you. Then we're going to Measure J budget updates.
Okay, a couple things I wanted to mention. This page looks different every time you get it. So I think one of the last one, the one before, did have the projects on the projected budget, but we were directed by council to put it in unallocated. So on my spreadsheet, I have it to the side. So when we're able to bring it back, I can bring it back over. One smart person had mentioned to me, you're all very smart, but the debt service had gone from 1.4 to 1.7, and I was going to lower it. But I remembered that was the approved budget at 1.7. It's still 1.4. That money will roll into your fund balance next year for you to spend even more. So with that, in 1920, we had 12.4 million, and 2021, we're at 13.7. So that's the increase of 1.3 million over. I meant to put a footnote on here. We collect taxes. Sales taxes are 2 months behind. So with that, we still have 2 more months that go back to this fiscal year. And remember, we do that cleanup kind of when we have the audit done in December. So we could probably bet on a couple more $1 million.
So this is based upon what you've actually received, or
Correct. And at the end of July, we'll receive May's. And at the end of August, we'll be receiving June. So those numbers will come back in the general ledger, and they're called accrued rather than a cash basis.
Yeah, but the 2019, 2020 is actually complete through June?
Those are both, I double checked that today before we get on this. Those both include 10 months of revenue. So it's a match to match.
Okay.
Any questions on that?
I think also small businesses had a delay in when they had to, I don't know how that affects anything. I know my business is not due until August.
July, right? End of July?
August 2nd, yeah.
Okay. So we might see a real big burst coming through.
For 21, 22, Nancy, the projected budget, what is that? Was it 16.3 million?
It's 16.5.
Okay, just wanted to.
So we're doing okay.
We're doing great. We're doing better than okay.
Well,
And as you guys all live in the area, you know, it doesn't seem to be slowing down too much anywhere.
praise.
Hey,
Thank you.
Thank you. Commission members' comments, requests?
yes, please. Mark Marshall. I just want to go back to something because I was having a hard time making a comment, but for background on this community money, the $1 million, for those who are aware, when we did that, early on, we found that city council was always coming in with their projects. Actually, the city was coming in with their projects. And it was never any money to do the projects we wanted for the citizens. So in some negotiation with the mayor at that time and the city council, we got that $1 million that we get to decide, pretty much. That said, I still think that even though you're gonna, I'm sure you've seen enough capital projects from the city come in, there's not enough money to cover them all. So going back to Justin's comment about his ranking, I think that's part of our oversight in telling the council what the capital projects the city has already taken the rest of that money in. Where do we see our priorities? Where do we see the city's priorities? So I don't want to just focus on the 1 million. I think we still have to give oversight to the rest.
Good point.
I agree, and I think, you know, I know that we have a community that we get to, projects that we have more discretion on, but I think this is an oversight commission. And I think it has turned, part of the problem that the frustration is that it has, in many ways, it becomes sort of a, you know, just sort of a vetting process to flow through. And I think we should oversee how these funds are. I guess they don't have to listen, but I think it's an important role, and this is a lot of money. And
I totally agree with you, Jeffrey. I think what we need to do, though, is focus on two different sides of it. Focus on our $1 million and then focus on the other projects. I would like to get the $1 million projects going sooner than later, so we could at least get those done and then focus on the other ones. And then right after the strategic planning meeting, we could go over some of their goals and then sort them by that. And we have these list of projects. But I really think it's two separate buckets, because this year, if you look at your budget schedule that I give you, this year you have left over $7.1 million, not even including your million. Next year, you're going to have, if we don't spend anything, you're going to have another 17 million. We have plenty of money to work with.
Right.
Why don't you?
I just, go
Oh,
ahead,
I was gonna
Linda.
say
Go
one
ahead.
other thing, and actually Sid may remember this, because the city park came up earlier, and that was one of our priorities. So we did allocate money toward parks, and we had made the provision that if it needed more money, then we would take it away from the $1 million we were going to get Parks and Recreation. Well, to be quite honest, what I'm seeing, and I may have missed something over the last 2 years, none of those projects that Sid and his group brought forward to us have gotten done. So if I were to rank city projects, I would say this is a priority. That's the way I would look at it. And so maybe we kind of look at when did these requests come in and where were they 3 or 4 years ago? I mean, the Armico track has been on there since day one.
Where did Brian go? He had a question. Brian, you were up?
Sorry, I was throwing a bug away.
Okay.
So this is not really additive, but to tag along to others' comments that I think the list itself that we received as part of the agenda today for the discussion, the 5-year projects, they're still, we have these recurring discussion points from specific projects that I think collectively, maybe not as a whole, but certainly as a majority, there seems to be a pretty instinctive reaction against putting money into certain projects. So that underscores this dynamic, a natural dynamic that the staff or the city via the city council might be endorsing big ticket items that the Oversight Commission of Measure J wants no part of right now.
Glad that here things haven't changed.
Okay, is there anything else?
Commissioner Feather, did you want?
Well, I just wondered if, the project money for $1 million didn't get spent last year. Why isn't it now 2 million? Doesn't the pot get bigger if you don't spend it?
It is. It's 2 million.
Get 2 million.
It is 2 million. Okay, thank you. So we have 2 million for the coming year. Okay, thank you. Mhm.
Any other comments?
So are we waiting
I'll try to jump in here. I know that Don and I have kind of just been hearing the discussions, and ultimately all those decisions that come from your commission, all your surveys, all the work that you put into will eventually come to Don and I to deliver. So all the work that you will put into it will become projects that Don and I actually have to build for you. So we are listening. We may be a little quiet, but we definitely have our opinions, and I think Don's very good at providing those opinions for the whole commission to view. I don't know if you want to talk about the projects, the list of projects that we put together. I know Commissioner Robin asked me to see how $16 million worth of projects would look versus the original 5 that I had in my 5-year CIP. And truly touching a little bit on what Commissioner Salto was asking earlier about what's different now. And what I wanted to say, but I really didn't say it, is that these are basically the same exact projects we've had for a long time. They were brought forward maybe 5 years ago, even before our time. They've been around. They seem to have just lingered, and some of them, the better projects, I guess, if you will, for lack of a better term, we constructed, we got them done. But these other ones are still hanging around. And I think a big example of something that has been around for a long time is Fire Station number 1. You actually don't see it on your list because I think that conversation is going to come around once again when the council starts looking at their priorities, and after the meetings that they have, that is going to be probably re-envisioned, and the description or scope of that work will be a little bit different, and we'll be able to give you a better project or scope. Well, that's why I completely took that one out. But these other ones have been around for a while, and I don't know if anyone has any questions on them or wants to discuss the 2 different lists, the 5 million, 5.8 versus the 16.3.
I have a couple of items just to flag, not really up for debate or anything like that. It's not that type of substance, but the first is, I think what got dropped off were the 3 projects that were approved for sustainability 2 or 3 meetings ago. that I don't think are being carried on Nancy's schedule, and I don't think they're being carried on engineering's future projects.
If you
These
can
were the-
interrupt, Brian, those will
Sure.
be part of the community projects of the 2 million you have.
Okay,
So what Don, Joelle can explain, what they send a request out to the departments so that it's fair. It's going to go to the Parks and Rec, it's going to go to facilities, and it's going to go to sustainability and fire and police. So we thought it would be fair if they brought them all back, the request, and if they wanted to come give a presentation to you on those projects at one
Yeah.
time.
great.
Yeah, for clarification, it's not the community project, it's the overall. So when we set out to do our 5-year CIP and when we look at next year, for example, we will send a request to all our departments to fill out the forms that you have in your spreadsheet here or in the attachment from the memo from engineering. They'll have to fill out a form, explain a project, explain how much it's going to cost, and then we would bring it forward and maybe even bring them forward to present to the commission for their request. So it's similar to community projects in that we as staff will deliver a survey or a request to our own departments to ask for that money. And that's the process that we're going to follow moving forward for new projects. All the other projects that some of the projects that exist started life that way. They were brought forward by different departments a long time ago, and they just have sat. And that's why I want to ask again, are these important, or what new projects do you have that are more important now so we can reshuffle? The purpose of the 5-year CIP is to be a living document to adjust regularly and to be able to make decisions. And that's one of the reasons why when I presented the 5-year CIP year one using Measure J funds, I didn't use all the money because I didn't know what was going to be in store in mid-year, or maybe closer to the end of the year, there might be a bit better project that comes up and the money is available instead of tying it up right now. So I can answer more questions, or if you have any other questions on the projects right now, they're pretty much, you've seen all of them. The only one is that's different, I guess, to point out is the dog park. And if you want to ask some questions about that, but it's really a project there that the city is going after grant money for. And I think the total cost is about 3.2 million, 3.5 million. And the city's share is going to be 50% of that. So if we get the grant goal, I think, or what was set in motion is to have Measure J for the pay for the 50% of the matching funds.
What did you say the city's percentage would be?
It's 50% of the grant, so it's about a $3.5 million project, and we would be paying for half of it.
Measure J, or isn't there Quimby funds?
It was another one. Yeah.
So there could be funds, but I think the original goal that was set out when the project was introduced was to have Measure J pay for the entire funds. At this point, we're only asking for funding for design, but I think the ultimate goal was to come back to ask for the full 50% for Measure J.
Yeah, Quimby was for the other part.
Right. This is correct.
The north part of the city. But
I'd like to, just not to go on and on, but the library remodel. I mean, what is the reality there? You're going to do the Frey building in the next 2 years, right? So that would be the place where Director Case would take her services, and that would then allow in 23 and 24 on to 26 that something begins at the library. So what is the plan for that?
There was an extensive series of community meetings and a
Yes, I'm
subcommittee.
aware of that.
Yeah, and so essentially it was decided for it to stay at Sunrise Park.
That's right.
Whether or not that's in the same building is to be determined. The next step is for a complete redesign and evaluation of Sunrise Park as a whole, so that the library can then determine how they fit in that larger
Yeah.
space. So it's a question of the park before we get to the building.
Right, and I think that sort of ties into the bigger discussion of council priorities,
Right.
setting down, and that's why I didn't include it in my original list, but the task of spending $16 million, you think it'd be easy, it isn't, right? You need to look at everything, so that's why I brought all these projects, and this is how I would say, if you want me to put $16 million away, here's a way to do it with projects that have existed. But that's not my preference. My preference is to fund projects that over a period of time and really ask for the full amount of money when we're getting ready for construction, or at least in the fiscal year we're going to construct it. But that's what I was asked to do. So that's why you have this list, and that's why I put the money in the main library renovation.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that was the end of the discussion of that committee, but the building itself isn't going anywhere, in my opinion, and there are major things that need to be done there, that could be done there. Also, Joel, the other resources on the second page is the foundation now. That could be included as outside sources of revenue. Am I right?
I could just,
Yeah. sure.
on the library, we had previously set aside funds for what we knew would either, something that would happen, whether it was a renovation or a new building or movement. And I know here it says renovation. I think that would be dependent upon the library coming back with what their actual plan is. But what we had said was that, you know, since it was likely to be a lot of money and we didn't want to put all the money at once at any one point, then it made sense to put some aside over time. I don't know if that's still the case, but that was it. The other
That's really the case, and that's, go ahead, Don.
We zeroed those buckets out as part of the pandemic, kind of balancing everything out. Those line items in the budget were all zeroed out when we thought we were going to have a huge shortfall. So now we're kind of starting from scratch again. But I think it's still in the 5-year budget. It's just that we pushed it to like the later years, knowing that it would be a huge public process in determining how the park would be used. And so obviously when you have public meetings, it delays things. So we didn't foresee like the big chunk of money being needed in the next 2 years, but the big construction could possibly start maybe 3 years from now, or who knows. You know, there was so many question marks as far as when we would need the funding, that we just thought it was prudent to push it out in the later years. And then as more questions are answered, we could obviously bring it forward. Yeah.
That's kind of my point, because this is a project that has lingered since this was voted upon. And I think now that there's all these big discussions have been held, that building is going to be there. That's a Cody building. And it very well could be declared a historical building. I'm not sure, but I asked that question. But the infrastructure is very poor: electrical, plumbing, lighting. And there's no reason why some of that cannot start once you have the Frey building done. Then Jeannie can run her business out of the Frey building and shut down the library. She's not excited about doing it in pieces because it really interrupts the business. But I think the plan here makes sense. And then you can start on the infrastructure in that building, which, you know, has to be done one way or the other. So that's
I mean,
just
I think
my interest.
we have given the library money for the design and repairs. Like, I'm pretty sure we already allocated that.
it was taken away though.
Oh, right. But I mean, I agree that I think it's like that's like pre initial planning of the library. And I think there was pretty firm consensus that from the commission before that we wanted to see the library like start any work wherever they needed, right? Because there's a lot of community discussion around what is our library needs, and there are some right now. So I think that was one thing. Though I did have a question around the Demuth Dog Park. And like how it was identified, by whom. Like, I thought it was also like not Measure J, but more kind of like a grant opportunity that seemed like could be a good fit. And I've mentioned this before, but Palm Springs is not a city that is like dog friendly on our trails anymore. And so as there's only kind of like one way to be with your dog outside in city spaces, and that's in parks. And if your dog doesn't into that, or it's like, it's kind of replicating an experience you can already have right now, as opposed to when it was first on the trail, on the North Lichen Trail, like right by downtown, when dogs were no longer allowed there, there was some talk of we will explore some other open natural space to see where else there could be a possibility of being dog friendly. And I have heard zero about that. Is there any like movement or possibility or even inquiry or curiosity about exploring that? Any thoughts?
I think the dog park came up from a Parks and Recreation looking for grants. Last year, I think they had looked for several state grants because there was also for a new park, I think, there was another grant for new parks. And they had this one that came in that they would do $1.6 million if the city matched it. And actually you do have on your report here that most of the matching funds come from Quimby. I don't know if that's changed. or not.
Could the history on that Demuth Dog Park, you can go to the January 20th, I think, 2020 City Council meeting and read that staff report in depth. But they did have community meetings because of that regional CVAG. I think it's CVAG, but it's a regional what they call habitat master plan or something like that. And so to be sensitive to the bighorn sheep, like dogs aren't allowed on the trails in the Coachella Valley. And that was passed many, many years ago. It's just the city was never in compliance. And so when they were developing this dog park, it had features to mimic dogs being on trails. That's why it has a lot less grass than the one behind City Hall. But again, they just did concept drawings. The design's not set in stone. Why it was included in the next 2 years was that the state of California Department of Recreation, Parks and Recreation, got 68 projects submitted, and then they selected about 7 or 8, I think 7 projects from the state of California and forwarded that on to the federal government, who actually provides the funding. And so usually when the state narrows it down like that, we in city government pretty much expect the federal government to honor the California Parks and Rec recommendations. And so we felt pretty good that that project would likely get funded. If it was like, some of the other grants where it's so competitive, we don't know if we're going to win. This one was one that we felt likely we would get just because of the vetting process it went through. And so that's the kind of history, but I suggest you do read that staff report from.
Yeah, no, I remember, and I presented at, I spoke at that meeting, so I actually remember it really clearly, but I thought they were gonna explore some alternative if they were gonna take those trails away. And it was,
multiple species habitat plan.
yeah, that they were like.
Yeah, and so it kind of cuts off all the trails in the Coachella Valley. So it's not like, it was just different cities were enforcing it. Some lax.
I thought it was certain land because there's the trails in Cathedral City and Palm Desert that for some reason.
So from our perspective, we haven't heard of the alternatives. What we have in front of us, engineering, is this particular park that we're working on right now. And I think to Commissioner Bernstein's comment, I think we did put on the sheets that it was coming from Quimby. We need to double check the funding sources. Right now, I think the only ask is around 200,000, but we'll double check. And I think to fix that if that's incorrect.
And then following up on Commissioner Robbins' comments, like some of the sustainability stuff might probably be funded by other funds. Like we said, this is always fluid, right? And so some of those projects could fit nicely with some of the grants that are out there, or come from another bucket, which is called Capital Projects Fund, which is completely separate from Measure J. So there's other funding sources that we in engineering are using to build things. We're just bringing forward the things that would be using Measure J money to you. So it's changing a lot. So Commissioner Bernstein, it may have started in Quimby fees, and that could have changed, and we didn't update the sheet. So we'll check.
Yeah. So getting back to the list, I don't think the commission is taking any action on it. It was just for review, correct? You just wanted to see what it would look like. with the $16 million being used. So we're not really, the commission is really not taking any action today on the memorandum, correct?
Yes.
So
Very, very helpful homework. Very
okay,
helpful.
there is one thing, and I don't know if I can ask it or not. I know we've had the discussion of, or we did last month about Victoria Park, removing it from the resurfacing project because it was so expensive. I didn't include it in my memo because I kept on seeing Victoria Park here and I didn't really, in my mind, I didn't separate the two, but I do have the ask of setting aside or allowing us to move forward with a new project to resurface Victoria Park. But to this date, I don't have, what's that?
The Victoria Park playground, just the
Playground surface, yeah, the Victoria playground surface. I still don't have a good number. I would like to ask if the commission could at least set aside not to exceed $400,000 to do the resurfacing. But we would like to bid it with our standard bidding process to get competitive bids and then come back and tell the commission or award it to really the contractor through a September council meeting. I don't know if that's possible or not. I just forgot to add it into my memo.
Any discussion about that? Anybody opposed?
$400,000 aside.
I'd actually prefer that we defer that, given everything else is in a holding pattern.
We could. I just thought if we are awarding in the next council meeting the two other parks that are being,
Sure.
and the other one I had to pull out because of lack of funding. We could also defer it. I'm fine doing that as well.
Yeah, and let me be a little clearer. The holding pattern is what it is for the moniker. My reaction to this, Joel, my reaction of now versus not now is really about there are so many other opportunities to consider all at one time. And if we were to consider at 7 p.m. this allocation for 400,000, there are plenty of others that deserve discussion.
Right. This was, yeah. And this is the only reason I ask is because it's a continuation of something that has already been approved and awarded by Measure J. But I'm okay waiting. I think the Parks and Rec Commission wants it done, but we could, in the overall discussion of the holding pattern, can say that we have not forgotten and we will bring it forward when we have the commission's approval. I can't bid it or do anything until I do have at least a certain amount of money that is certain. So I can't even come back and tell you this is what I think the actual cost is going to be, because that's the problem we're running into right now. We have been. No one's really giving us real costs because of material and inflation, price, and the only way to control it is to bid it properly. And the only way to bid it is to certain some dollars. But I think the project's still needed and it could come back in 3-4 months and still be okay. So I'm okay.
Joel, what would that allocation, what would you need for soft costs to be in a position to bid?
Well, I would be uncomfortable bidding a project that I didn't have funds secured to.
Okay. All right. So it's not a question of
no, we know
$25,000 or $40,000.
No, we know what we need. Yeah. No.
Do you feel from what's going on that this 400,000, if you were putting it on hold for the time being, the way the market is, would be a moderate increase, a substantial increase?
I wouldn't venture to guess because the market could go down as well.
Okay.
And from what I heard today, the market is starting to go down a little bit, and the
prices are going down. Yeah, and the 400,000 is an overkill. But I just don't want to come back and ask you for money again for any of it. Commissioner Burr will chew me.
It seems to me, knowing how bidding goes, that we should go ahead with this. If you already approved it, I obviously wasn't on the commission at that time. If you can,
no, I'm comfortable. Yeah, I'm comfortable as well. I'm okay with it. It's just it's so unpredictable right now, and I don't want to come back and say something different. So I can wait.
Any
And,
other?
and Mark, it was previously approved, but the project was upsized, the pricing was upsized, so the scale, the scope was downsized.
Okay,
Mark?
yes.
Oh, I thought you were wanting to say something else.
Oh, no, I'm just concerned is like, I know how the bidding goes, and if you're gonna get a better price if we're doing it all at once. So that's what I'm concerned. I mean, I don't want to be pound, penny wise and pound foolish here.
Now, in this instance, it's going to be a standalone project, and the numbers are going to be what they are whenever we put it out to bid, whether the market's up or down. In bulk, it would have been with the 3 other projects, but because we pursued government contracting, we didn't bid it in bulk, and we didn't get prices that I thought should have been received. I mean, we just weren't getting the numbers that we wanted from the government pricing. That's why I want to go back to design bid, the way we typically do projects.
Any other comments on this? Okay, then I guess we'll stand with the hold on this.
It's 7 o'clock.
Again?
It's 7 o'clock.
It's after 7, yeah.
Yeah.
Wrap it up.
All
Yeah.
right.
Can I add a real quickie to Dawn and Joel, request? Shade structures are going up. Are there any Measure J signs to hammer in the ground?
Not that we've provided, but they definitely are going up all over the parks. So yeah.
I thought the signs existed in somebody's garage.
No, the
Those
last
were-
time we found the signs, Nancy, didn't we find them out in the courtyard and I got a group and we cleaned them up? Are they still outside in the courtyard?
I don't know, where did you end up leaving them? I know we went out there and there were some really good looking signs and some that were bad, but I thought somebody was going to keep them in their garage. So they were sitting outside on the ground and they were getting dusty and dirty.
Right, no, there's a communication because they never went, after we had them up, they were supposed to be picked up and they went to go back to the courtyard, to the service yard. But that's were the last ones that we had.
Well, Sid, what did we do last time?
We went out there, you and I went out there, we found them, we cleaned
Dusted
them
them
up.
off and put them in your car.
Right, and then then they only went back after the event and it was picked up by the city. That's what I was told.
So what are we going to have to do this time, Sid?
I guess I'm gonna have to go out and look in the courtyard, look in the courtyard and find them again.
There
You're
you go.
welcome, Sid. You're
Robin.
welcome.
Also the sidewalk stamps?
No, this was like they have the
No,
wooden
I
pole.
remember, but I'm saying in addition to that, I thought we were gonna do the sidewalk stamps near Measure J projects. Could do that. If we're looking around in a courtyard and nothing comes up.
Yes, yeah, you're right, because I had brought up about putting those flagpole ones and it was decided that we would do the ones on the posts and put them in the ground. I think there was a communications where they weren't ordered, but if they weren't, I'm gonna go out, I'm going out on Monday to the city yards and do some scouting, Commissioner Robin. If I don't find them, then can we agree that we will have them ordered ASAP?
Yeah, I'm thinking if they're at the courtyard and they're not indoors, they're not going to be in greatest shape. I can meet you out there, Sid. Just give me a call and I'll go out there with you.
I'll call you Monday morning.
We can
Perfect.
add this to the special meeting of 2 things to approve, the survey and then the signage.
Perfect.
And
Okay.
I have the concrete stamp. It's in my office. That hasn't gone away.
And unless there's anything else, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. We stand adjourned.
Thank you. Have a
Thank
great
you.
evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Nice work.
Bye.
Thank you.
Everyone.